Hey everybody, how's it going? Just wanted to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Kobold Press. Kobold Press is an amazing game design company. You know them if you've been listening to DSPN since the start, really. 12 Peculiar Towers is a collection of 5th edition adventures for characters levels 1 to 13 with the theme of, you guessed it, towers. Discover the mysteries that lie within the forest lair of a Ravenfolk bandit gang, a magical archive of ancient elven lore, the hideout of a powerful thieves guild master, the stronghold of a sinister blood mage, and 8 other distinctive, awesome, play-tested to the Kobold Max dungeons. Each tower contains a beautifully illustrated map, including a lot of isometric maps, and who doesn't love that? And of course, there's plenty of traps, hazards, and enemies to challenge your players. You can get 12 Peculiar Towers in print and PDF today at koboldpress.com. That's koboldpress.com. Tell them DSPN sent you. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, it's the year that was 2018 in role-playing games. I'm chatting with Tanya DePass, Jeff Stormer, and Darcy Ross about tabletop role-playing games. We touch on D&D a little bit, but mostly we're talking about other tabletop role-playing games. We are going to have a year that was D&D podcast as well coming out. So look forward to that. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy 2018 in RPGs. All right, everybody, now I am here with 3 amazing people. We are going to talk about the year that was, our personal years, and how everything went in 2018. In the world of tabletop role-playing games, I fear that we'll get lost at sea if we talk too much about other things that happened in 2018 that were bigger and crazier and more important. So let's go around the table real quickly, and everybody, please tell me who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games. Darcy Ross, welcome back. Let's start with you.
Hey, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Darcy Ross. I am the Community Relations Coordinator for Monte Cook Games. So I like to talk to people, and I'm super happy with playing with communities, and I'm the staff extrovert. So, and I'm also known for snails and squeakiness and a couple other little RPG beloved projects that maybe I can talk about today. So thanks for having me back.
Excellent. Well, it's always awesome to have you here. So I'm super, super excited. And for the first time here on Tabletop Babble, Tanya, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya DePass. I have done some diversity consulting. I've done some writing that hopefully I can talk about in the new year. I'm working with Darcy and Monte Cook Games on Your Best Game Ever. I'm super excited for that. And as for what I do regularly, I am on the Rivals of Waterdeep, which is on Wizards of the Coast D&D channel every Sunday, 12 p.m. noon, 10 a.m. Pacific. We're on a little bit of a break due to the holidays. We come back January 20th for season 3, and Sharif Jackson is going to take a turn at the DM chair. He is one of our starting cast members. And I also GM Star Trek Adventures on Roll20. That is by Modifius.
Excellent. Yeah, both of those shows are amazing. People should totally check those out. And it is super great to have you here, Tanya, for the first time. It has been a long time coming, I might say, because I've been following you on Twitter for a while and wanted to have you on the show. And Jeff Stormer, welcome back to you as well. Who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hey, I am a podcaster and game designer, and perhaps most importantly, the official LARP designer of the Olive Garden restaurant. I host a podcast called Party of One about 2-player role-playing games. I also co-host a podcast called All My Fantasy Children about character creation and role-playing games. And I just recently wrapped the Kickstarter for a game called Mission Accomplished. There's a salute in the title that I don't fully know how to put into text. It is a game about super spies and office meetings.
Yes, welcome back, Jeff. It's always good to have you on. And today we're going to talk about the year that was in tabletop role-playing games. We'll probably touch on D&D a little bit, but we'll also have a separate podcast where we talk more about the year that was in D&D, because there's a lot to talk about there as well. So as we're kicking off the conversation, I want to go around the table and let's talk briefly about your favorite new RPG you discovered in 2018. It can either be something that came out this year or something that you personally discovered that you want to share with the world. And it should be something that people on this panel have not worked on, just to avoid our personal biases and love for each other, because we will be talking more about the RPGs these people produced later on at the end of the show. So Darcy, let's start with you. What's one of your favorite new role-playing games that you've discovered?
Yeah, so I've gotten to play Mission Accomplished, and it was a delight. And I've gotten to touch some other games that people on this panel have worked on. So I'll leave them aside. Sadly, one of the favorite things that I was able to read and I've watched play but haven't gotten to play myself is Mutants in the Night, which just came out with its sort of had an early access PDF document earlier on, and now it just came out with sort of a more finalized product, and it has a stream going for it. So it is a game by DC, Dungeon Commander, and it's about it's a really, really cool kind of game about playing kind of oppressed mutants and others, and navigating how you struggle against limitations that are being placed on you and other community members that you care about. But one of the most fascinating mechanics in it that I saw is this sort of framing device. I love games where you can throw narrative to the players and where it feels like we're all collaborating. And I feel like that happens a lot in my games in the early on, where we're building characters and we're establishing a world. But this little framing device kind of lets that happen continuously through play. And it what's really cool is you can kind of sit at the upper level of, like, so some players really like to get into dialogue, and I'm right here in this moment. I'm role playing, and some players don't like to exist as much at that level. And this little framing device kind of lets people sit at different aspects of the narrative concurrently. And be, you could have one player who's sort of sitting back a little bit, doesn't want to really role play this scene, but is helping pepper details about the location. So I'm just like fascinated by this cool framing device that came out in Mutants in the Night. So you can purchase it now, and I can't wait to play.
Wow, that's really great. I definitely want to check that out after that review. I hadn't even heard of that one. So this is why we do this, to help spread the good word and see what else is out there. That sounds awesome. How about you, Tanya? Do you have a favorite game that you've discovered in 2018?
There's a couple. So also Dungeon Commander, DC sent me a copy. And so I'm super, super excited to catch the streams of it. And also I'd love to play with people, like just have a game where I can chill with my friends and play it, because a lot of us do tabletop online for an audience. And I'm thirsty for a game I can just sit down and play with friends. And it's not performance as well as role playing. But also Chris Spivey from Darker U Studios had Harlem Unbound. I got a chance to look at it and see it. Super excited for that. I do want to play more of it. It was just a taste that I got of it. A game set in Harlem, and tabletop has a dearth of games created by people of color that get attention. It was up for a Diana Jones Award as well. So Chris's game, Harlem Unbound, DC's game, Dungeon Commander, on Twitter with minus the E in Commander, who's also on the Star Trek show that I do. And the other thing that's not D&D related is Dungeon World by Latora and Adam Coble. I got a chance to play that in a game that Blue Jay ran at PAX West. She did a game for patrons, and it was fun. I think it's a very good way to ease people into role playing that isn't as super crunchy, that isn't as demanding. It's a simple system. You can only have one of each archetypes. You don't have like a party of all bards, and then you go like run into an ogre and everyone dies. So Dungeon World, Harlem Unbound, and Mutants in the Night are the games that I have discovered in this new year, or in the year that's ending.
Yeah, Harlem Unbound is one on my list too. That is just a really great game. And a couple weeks ago on this podcast, we actually talked to Chris Spivey, and I've talked to Ruth Tillman before, who also had a hand in doing some stuff with that. So it is just one of the best gumshoe games around, definitely out there. So people should check that out and check out everything else on Tanya's list. There is good stuff there. So Jeff, this is a tough act to follow. What do you have for us that you discovered in 2018?
Yeah, it is a tough act to follow. I had made a list, and I had made a list specifically because I was like, well, I'm going to put Mutants in the Night first, because that's probably going to get cut out. So, but if it doesn't, I'm going to be able to talk about that. So I have some backups. We're good. The game that I really want to talk about is a game that I played this year. It was, I'm going to stick on brand and talk about a 2-player role-playing game because, you know, I know what the audience is looking for. The game that I played that, like, stuck with me the most. There's two of them that I'll talk on briefly. They're both 2-player games. One is Dead Friend by Lucian Kahn. It is a game of necromancy. It is basically someone is summoning a ghost for a purpose, and you play through a number of scenes, sort of establishing the relationship between this summoned ghost and this necromancer, as it sort of builds to this final like battle and this parting of ways. And it's really just fascinating the way that it kind of inputs like ritual and scene play, and it sort of tells this story while letting you fill in the details and the tones of this story, and it's absolutely fascinating. I loved that. It blew my mind when I played it. And the other game is called Starcrossed by Alex Roberts. It is a 2-player game of forbidden romance about two people who really, really want to, but really, really shouldn't. It is played with a tumbling woodblock tower, much like the popular game Dread. Except it's two people sitting across from each other on a table, pulling bricks as they play through this forbidden romance, and sort of the tension between the two of them builds. And the way that it uses that tower, that wooden tower, to like introduce that element of like tension and friction, and the way that it plays with the tower as an object is like absolutely mind-blowing and incredible. And also it like wraps in safety mechanics like more like seamlessly and elegantly than a lot of games that I have played like introduce them and approach them. And I think a lot about Starcrossed, if I'm being honest. I think a lot about that game.
That's cool. That's always great. And it's always cool to see what people are doing with new mechanics, and what any game with a Jenga tower I'm all for, because it's usually easy to teach people to play.
I'm sorry, Jenga is a copyrighted term. Can we not?
Yes, I'm sorry. Any game with a tumbling woodblock tower. Although if Jenga wants to sponsor this podcast, go ahead, Jenga, and then we'll mention you more. So yeah, I mean, I'm all about that, because I do think it makes when we can think outside of dice and mathy mechanics, it gets even easier to teach people a game typically. So that's really great. And Starcrossed is just tons of fun and deep and interesting. And it makes you feel, you know? So in addition to a lot of the games that have been listed, I just want to shout out 2 other games that kickstarted this year, and I think have playtest editions out that people can check out. One is called Die Laughing. It's a single shot RPG wherein you play a horror game with your friends that is supposed to be like a B horror movie, where everyone or most people die by the end of it. But what makes it really interesting is after you die, you still have a role to play. You're a producer of this movie that's being made. And you can do things like cut the budget so that people who don't have the props that they thought they had, and make monsters more powerful and that sort of thing, because you're dead. And of course, now you want the rest of your friends to be dead as well. So I like that because it gives you something to do after you die. And a lot of horror games don't do that. And then there's a game called The Forest Hymn and Picnic, which is this just delightful, lovely game that's like a romp through the woods. There's adventure, but think like Wind in the Willows style adventure, where everything is fun, or even Winnie the Pooh-esque. There's not going to be a lot of murdering of other creatures or stealing treasure or that sort of thing, but there are these fun, adventurous romps through the woods. And what I really like about it is it uses the Shadow of the Demon Lord rules, Shadow of the Demon Lord is a dark fantasy game known for its grossness, but it has a really great rule set. So it's cool that there's this option for this really great rule set if you don't want gross stuff happening in your game as well. And even if you like Shadow of the Demon Lord, I think you'll enjoy The Forest Hymn and Picnic. It's a really, really fun game by Cecil Howell. So go check both of those out when they come out or in their playtest iterations, which I think you can check out right now for most people. So those are some of the favorite games that we have going of 2018. How about some awesome industry moments in 2018 that happened? Can anybody think of anything that was like super cool, that it was like, this was great, this was a great thing for the RPG industry as a whole? Tanya, do you have anything? Why don't you start us off?
I was just thinking that real play podcasts and shows winning the Diana Jones Award was good, because I've met some people either that are resistant to the idea of streaming RPGs, or think that it's weird and diluting it in some way, but streaming and podcasting is bringing more and more people back to tabletop. It's giving people like us that may have started with either D&D or various editions of whatever we're playing a way to play with friends that may not be local, because I'm sure a lot of us remember, well, there's no one local, I guess we can't play D&D or, fill in the blank. And it's a way to also just educate people or give people that maybe they want to get into it and they're intimidated and they can watch other people playing and have a good time. For as much grief as folks want to give Critical Role, and I was one of those people until I got to meet some of the folks there, it has revitalized a lot for tabletop. And granted, a lot of people may watch it because of who's on the show. Maybe they have zero interest in D&D, but it has brought a spotlight back to what we do. And with that, there's so many shows on Twitch, on Mixer. People are doing real play podcasts. So, because a lot of people may or may not be into watching, but they can listen while they commute, while they're at work, what have you. I think it's a great thing. And granted, I do stream. I'm on a show. But, bias aside, I'm going to admit my confirmation bias. It's a good thing because, I'm in my 40s. I have a lot of people that, have moved away, their lives changed, had kids. They can't dedicate all this time on a weekend to stay up all night like we used to, but they can schedule 2 to 3 hours to hop online or on Discord or something and hang out with friends and do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much to be mined from actual play, including the huge impact it's had on the industry. So many people are discovering role-playing games or have heard about role-playing games and didn't understand what they were, right? Like, this is a great way to, rather than take 20 minutes to try to explain what a role-playing game is, if you can turn on a YouTube video and somebody gets it in 30 seconds, that's incredible. So I think all of us as streamers or people who have a podcast have an opinion that leans in a positive direction towards that. But I don't understand anyone who does have a negative opinion about it, even if they don't watch it, because I don't think there's a lot of people who are, I think there's this belief that it hurts the industry because everybody should be Matt Mercer. And I think if anything, the amazing variety of streamed games show that you can be a lot of different people and have a lot of different styles of play and still enjoy the game. So how about you, Darcy? Do you have a favorite industry moment of 2018?
A little tongue-in-cheek, but Twitch finally listed tabletop RPGs as its own category now, so you don't have to list your non-D&D game as D&D to get people to see it. So I don't know quite where the dynamics are, whether people have really moved over to that or whether D&D still takes it. But I feel like that was a silly but nice moment of acknowledgement from Twitch that, like, a platform that started out as intended to be for video game streaming is really now being used in a lot of really interesting different ways, and tabletop RPGs are a big one of those. So that was my sort of that's a defining moment that you heard the voices, you could feel the voices of nerds crying out in joy across the world as that finally thing we've been asking for finally got done.
Yeah, that was huge. That was really, really good. And it's great to see spotlights happening on all kinds of games, especially since, again, all of us have streamed games that are not D&D here. So it's great to be able to have that. And also as a viewer, it's great to be able to get in there and see, like, okay, what are people doing that isn't Dungeons & Dragons? And it's a great way to discover new games.
Could I also mention like a pattern that I don't quite understand yet, but I think, it's less of a moment, but more of a thing I've seen this year that I would like to see more of. Like I know Avery Alder has been doing a thing where she kind of brings in up and coming designers and gives them mentorship and things like that. And I think I've been seeing a couple little pockets of this. Like Pelgrane Press had a little workshop for people who might want to write for them at some point, and they specifically targeted historically underrepresented writers in our industry, right? The people from those groups. And I think like it's really cool to be seeing people who have kind of like made it in the industry, like twirling that power and that those connections they have around and that experience, and like doing really directed, concrete kind of mentorship work. I think that I'm excited to see where that might lead. So that's a pattern I've noticed. Maybe not this year. I think it has longer roots, but I'm not very observant, so I only knew about it this year.
I think that's important, bringing new people into the fold, and also seeing that when the base of creators is becoming more diverse and different, we get diverse and different games that are awesome that everybody can play. That's good for everybody. That is really, really good for everybody. Jeff, how about you? Do you have any favorite moments in 2018?
Like Darcy, I'm going to go with something that is more of a pattern that I've been seeing and that like I would love to see more of. But like something that I've noticed big and specifically within tabletop and like a lot like Twitch is something that was video game specific becoming sort of tabletop specific as well, is like Itch.io blew up in like a big way, in like specifically as a place to sell and buy and look for role-playing games. I have talked extensively about my frustrations about being able to find to specifically search for role-playing games and LARPs, and Itch being a way to do that in a way that is easy to set up a store, easy to sell your product, easy to get paid for it. Like even I remember even as early as like probably January, early this year, like you could search for like LARP and not find a ton of results on Itch. But over the course of the year, I feel like it's kind of blown up a little bit with a lot of smaller indie designers being like, I can set up an Itch store in 20 minutes, like put up a PDF of the things that I'm working on and like build and like manage that directly and not have to go through sort of a lot of the like higher level, negotiation processes and things. And like that's just been really exciting because the interface is nice, the search function is nice. I am a big fan of more tabletop people using Itch as a selling platform because I think it is good for the designers and the sellers of games, and it's great for players who are looking for things because it is designed to make it easy to help you find games and things.
Yeah, that's huge. Certainly, the amount of tools that are doing that too, that are making things easier for creators, is huge and wonderful. And please keep them coming, tech people. So moving on, let's talk about some favorite cons of 2018. Jeff, did you have any favorite cons that you went to in 2018?
I missed a lot of conventions this year because my friends kept getting married on convention weekends, which was, I believe, a personal attack against me. Is how I've chosen to interpret this. But I like the two cons that I distinctly remember making it to. I went Metatopia. Obviously, Metatopia is one of my favorite conventions every year. It is a game design festival from the folks at Double Exposure. It is 3 days of designers playtesting games and like industry panels. And as someone that loves feeling like I am working at a convention, it is my favorite convention because I feel like I'm at work the whole time, but in a fun way. I loved Metatopia, and a con that I did not think I was going to have nice things to say about because I was honestly, and I've talked about being a little underwhelmed at my experience last year, but like I had a great time at PAX Unplugged this year. I feel like they put a lot of things in place that they didn't have last year, particularly in terms of like making it easy to run games as a person who wants to run role-playing games that are not Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League games. Like there was a lot of stuff put in place to make that easier. And I felt like my experience at the con like reflected that a lot in that like I showed up at a spot. I signed up in advance. I said, I want to run Worldwide Wrestling Friday at 7. And I showed up Friday at 7, and an enforcer was like, here's your table. Your group is on the way. We filled out the sign-up sheet. We have players for you. And I was like, okay, cool. This is what I wanted. This is all I need out of a convention. I can play the game that I want with a group of people. Hooray. And like, I like that, and just the experience, the layout of the convention center was great. It was a great people. There were great panels and games and events, and I just had a great time overall. I was very, very pleased at PAX Unplugged 2018.
Yes, love to hear that Philly love too, as you know. Yes, yeah.
Also, I just had to hop a trolley. I didn't have to drive. I didn't have to fly or drive anywhere. It was great. Slept in my bed.
Exactly. Agreed. Which is why I love PAX Unplugged.
Don't go anywhere. There's more tabletop babble coming up.
Gather round, travelers, to hear our tale.
A mysterious organization called the Sisters of Sorrow have swept up our three heroes, and it is up to Kara, Saye, and Arnadel to do battle with the forces of evil and financial destitution.
We shall battle with ancient lore.
Take them down with our sharp reflexes?
Hey, did you guys finish the last of the ale?
Venture Maidens is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition actual play podcast featuring a cast of 4 lifelong gamers.
Kara, not now. We're recording a podcast ad.
Right. I chop it with my axe.
For gold and glory.
We post our episodes every other Sunday. We've got monsters, treasure, role-playing, a cool plot, and some strange NPCs. Find the Venture Maidens podcast today on iTunes or wherever podcasts are free. Until then, venture away.
All right, back to the show.
How about you, Tanya? Did you have any favorite cons of 2018?
I'm in a second PAX Unplugged. The second year's run a lot better. It was a lot smoother. We had way more traffic in the Diversity Lounge this year. My nonprofit had a table. I was on a lot more panels. I like the layout a lot better. You know, the higher security was a slight pain, but I'd rather have that than the other options. Hopefully next year they can smooth this out a bit better and have like one entrance for exhibitors and speakers and one for the general public, because the exhibitor line was actually longer than the general public line the first day I went. And con I didn't know about until Carlos and Serena told me about it. Was Gamehole Con up in Madison, Wisconsin. For me, it's a short drive. It was good to go. It was small. It was chill. Got to see some friends that I don't normally get to see, and I actually had a chance to hang out with folks that normally go to big cons and they're shepherded around. You don't get to see them. Got to see a lot of our D&D folks, and it was nice because it was like a 3-hour drive. It wasn't far away. I was home the night that it was over, and it was very relaxed. But it was also that this is my first year going. I don't know a lot of people, that vibe, but I think if I go back, I'll get to know more people. I'm still on the fence about Gen Con, and I know that people would be mad about Gen Con slander, but deal with it because it's huge. It's a huge convention. I feel like I literally had to walk a couple miles to where my panels were in the football stadium. And like every other tabletop focused convention or anything else I go to, I could count the number of people of color on maybe 1 or 2 hands that I actively saw. And so I'm not sure how I feel about it because it cost me more to go to Gen Con, even with someone else footing the bill, than it cost me to go to PAX West in Seattle. It should not cost me that much money to go somewhere that's a 2-hour drive away. So I don't know how I feel about it. It was only my second year going, and I was involved in panels and stuff, but I don't feel like it was super productive for me on a professional standpoint. And yes, people may get mad. I may get some nasty tweets about it, but it is what it is. It was a 4 days of a lot of expense and a lot of time, and I'm not sure what came out of it for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, right? There's something to be said that Gen Con is getting so big, it is expensive, it is crowded, and it takes forever. If you have one event that ends at one time, and then you have another event across the way that starts at another time, and you only have the 10-minute window to get from one to the next, you're never going to make it. You need way, way more time, and it's crowded, and it's crazy.
I've been to conventions with twice as many people and felt half as stressed as I did at Gen Con. I don't know if it's just laying it out over 7 different buildings, but my wife and I used to go to Comic-Con every year. That was our annual honeymoon adventure, or New York Comic-Con, I should say. And it had twice the listed attendance, but being in one space that I could weasel through was just, I don't know. I feel like I was more flustered at Gen Con than I was at larger industry events, and I don't know what that says about Gen Con.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, Gen Con is a hard puzzle to figure out. It's got so many people and that sort of thing. So I agree. How about you, Darcy? What conventions are you a fan of?
Yeah, I would agree that Gen Con has become a bit of FlusterCon, but I'll leave that aside. It's still good to see everybody, and so the temptation to always go back, even despite its frustrations, is always strong. And of course, now I go as an exhibitor, which is really exciting. I've been going to Gen Con for several years, but one con I went to this year that I was not working for MCG at, that was really, really lovely, and I really want to go back to, is Big Bad Con. In California. It's been on my radar for quite a few years now. I had heard a lot of like really overwhelmingly good things about how welcoming it was, and how people who like, especially from some trans folks I know, were like, Big Bad Con made me feel like it was the only place I really like felt safe and, really welcomed, and like my needs are really cared for and paid attention to. So I had interviewed Sean Nittner, who runs it, a couple years back, about like what produces that. And this year is the first year I really got to see it, and it's wild, just the community that they've built. And they have these little kind of Dungeon World, Apocalypse World style playbooks that you get as attendees, where you have little boxes to check off of like checking in on someone, or hey, go do a self-care thing. There are these different like classes you can work yourself through. So between that and just like the community of people it's cultivated over time, it was just a wildly different place of existence, right? Like the way that people, total strangers, would interact with me and check in on me, and kind of the vulnerability that I was allowed to sort of open up to and share with others. It was like very beautiful. So that was just a wild cultural experience. And then they've got these really neat like little private hotel rooms that they rent out for private little game spaces, for tabletop games, for LARPs. And I always wanted to see what that was like. And it was incredible. It's so well run, and I got to play just incredible games. So this year was a big year for playing my first LARPs. And one of the LARPs I played there was This Is My Power Button. And one of the creators, Birdie Atwater, was one of the facilitators. And I fell in love with a robot, and had a deep emotional and heartbreaking experience, and like cried a lot after. So it was a good con. I played so many good games. I got to meet so many good people. It just like left me, I felt like I gained so much from that con and really have kept it with me. So I'm really eager to go back if I can.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's a really great experience. Looking forward to 2019, what do you all think the RPG industry needs to do next year to make itself a better place for all gamers? Tanya, let's start with you, because I know you have this mission, and one of the things you were saying about Gen Con is you don't see a lot of people of color. So what is one thing you think people in the industry can do to help make it better for everybody, and maybe we see among those 70,000 people at Gen Con more people of color attending?
I think it needs to be more cost effective, more cost friendly, because as much as I love the hobby, it's not a cheap one. Even just getting in on the ground floor of, let's say, D&D, you're looking at $45 to $50 in the US, not counting other countries. Your player's handbook, if you want a GM, there's another $40, $50. Decent dice, anywhere from $10 to $12 for a set before you start getting into fancy dice. If you are going to play online, you need good internet, you need time. So I think there needs to be more inclusion of people at the table, and not just, look, we're diverse. Oh my God, we have a brown person, we have a woman, we have an out queer person. Because I talked about this a lot at PAX Unplugged, where a lot of people are like, but what can I do to bring more people to the table? And instead of going, hey, I like what you do. You wrote a game that I really like. Do you want to come play with us? Do you want to show us how to play your game? It feels like there's a lot of like, and it's going to sound unkind, crayon collecting, kind of color minutes and ad placement, where people go, well, who do you know that's a person of color? Because then that tells me that you're not coming to me because you want me on your show as a good role player, as a good GM, as a good writer. You want to fill your slot to look diverse. So there needs to be the inclusion, not just the color bent and diversity of, look, we're going to do a stream, we're going to have one of each. Or, when you write a game, when you have people of color in your setting, one, don't come up with these fantastical reasons why people of color exist in your fantasy setting. There are dragons, there are elves. I don't need a 20-page thesis on why this one brown person happens to exist in your kingdom. Don't give us backstories about, well, you're illiterate, you're poor, you were probably an escaped slave. Don't overlay the things that we can't escape from now onto this fantasy setting, because it's fantasy, especially if you're the GM or if it's your system you're creating, you have control over this. Player handbooks are guides. They're not written in stone. They're not, you must follow this rule exactly or no one will ever play a game with you again. So it's being inclusive, not just welcoming. It's walking the walk, because, and this is a thing that happened to me a lot at PAX Unplugged, and I know people meant well, but they came to me and told me all their tales of, oh my God, I found people and our group is so inclusive, and we welcome these brown folks, we welcome these queer folks. Cool story. A, why are you telling me I'm not going to give you brownie points? That's what you're supposed to do. If this hobby is welcoming to everyone, it's what you're supposed to do. Why is it you're coming and telling me this? I'm not going to pat you on the head and go, good job, because that, just if anyone ever meets me in person after hearing this podcast, please don't come and tell me that at a convention, because I will give you the look, and Darcy knows the look. not because Darcy's got the look. She's seen me make the face. Doing the things you're supposed to do, you're supposed to be welcoming to your table. You're supposed to realize that putting a narrative of slavery or illiteracy or something because you think, well, you're brown, so clearly this must be your backstory. Because if you can have dragons, surprise, you can have brown people without having to have this idea. If you run conventions, invite people of color as your guests, and not just so you can get your diversity points, but I like what you do. Like people like Chris Spivey, Dungeon Commander, they're creating good content. Invite them because they are great people in the space, not because you want to get that brownie for having a person of color as a guest of honor. And shout out to OrcaCon with disclosure that I work for the con, but that is the mantra of the convention, to be more diverse, to bring more people. And, find ways to include people. Don't make it so, well, I can't find brown people. I can't find queer people. To me, that tells me you're not looking. You're not going outside. You're not looking on Twitter. You're not looking in other spaces where we are. Go out and make friends that are not other white dudes. That's the long and the short of it. And, follow people on Twitter, not in a creepy way. Don't ask for emotional labor. But follow them, see what they're talking about, see what it is they need. And when people's Kickstarters come out, Misha Bushhager, Dungeon Commander, Chris Spivey, a friend of mine, Quinn Murphy, all these people have done work, but yet when they put out Kickstarters, when they put things like that, a lot of times it either doesn't get funded, or you always get the, well, why does it have to be about brown people? Because nobody else is making this content, so why can't I? And there's just so much more I could yell about, but I won't. But the TLDR is be inclusive, not just diverse. Invite people to the table, literally and figuratively, and be welcoming. And because that, for me, that's going to go a lot further than just messaging me or tweeting at me publicly going, hey, I need people of color for my show. Do you want to join us? The answer is going to be no.
That is incredible. And it's, it is pretty obvious and simple. A lot of it comes down to, right, using your brain and also finding great, awesome people out there and following them, which is you will be rewarded for it just by virtue of the fact that these are amazing people that you're getting to follow, and you're getting amazing ideas and being entertained and watching great content be created before your eyes. So yeah, totally agree. Darcy, how about you? Is there anything that we can do that you would like to see done in 2019 to make the gaming industry more welcoming to people?
I want to underline so many things of what Tanya just said, but
Sure.
that would take a while. So, and I guess one thing I would say is, if you are like, I am looking and I don't know how, don't ask people of color. Come ask some white people. Let them do, if you see some white people who seem to game with people of color, go bother them with your questions, or go get a diversity consultant and pay them. Anyway, so that's my addendum there. But I guess one thing I'm interested in, there was a big conversation around Invisible Sun, which has existed since it was kickstarted a bit ago, and then it went out of print. It's this big elaborate game that comes in a giant black cube, and in terms of accessibility, it is not very accessible, right? It's an expensive piece, but it is it's actually not much more expensive than the base game of D&D now. but for many reasons, it's a piece of art and it's a labor of love of Monty's, and it's this really cool, weird, surreal game. And I think it does a lot of interesting things that are good. But part of the conversation that it spurs is, the giant price tag and and so I think that's a whole conversation that I'm interested in. But there was a side conversation that emerged from that makes me really curious for 2019 in the future, which is just like what Tanya said. Hey, when people of color, so when Monty kickstarts something, and I love Monty and he's amazing, and it's our whole team, and we've it's not just the white dude, right? There's a bunch of us, but when Monty kickstart something, it might go gangbusters, and I know all the work that goes into that, and so, but then there's lots of work going into these kickstarters by people of color, and they're not going as gangbusters, and you could pick apart all the reasons why, but I think part of it is part of that is addressable disparity, right? And so what I'm curious about, there was a sort of cool conversation happening, is like, all right, so these people who have made it and who really do have like this pull or this ability to like generate a lot of money to do these big projects, is there more that like they and working for MCG we can be doing to like feed back into the industry, so that like I'm just really interested in how we can take those like these tools that we've built and like turn that back on the industry, because like a strong community and a stronger industry is going to be good for everybody, right? So like I'm really curious about what companies that are doing really well, or individual white designers that are doing very well, like what can if everyone could like chop off a bit of their effort and a bit of their pull and direct it back toward these places that aren't getting as fed and watered, right? These communities that aren't getting as much pull or notice as they should because they're making great things. So I could think of a couple concrete ways this could happen, but like I think it's part of a larger conversation that I would really like to see had by like the people who are really stable to like redirect some of that power and some of that technique and influence on other people. And maybe that is in the form of mentorship. Maybe it's in helping with marketing, right? Or maybe I'm not exactly sure, honestly. I even think about this with streamers, right? Are there ways that big streamers can help use their power for to sort of bring up others at very low cost to them, but just such great productivity for the rest of people, right? So that's a really vague thing, I know, but it's very much on my mind, and I'm determined to come up with some more concrete ways to make that happen.
Definitely. And this is a podcast topic in and of itself for sure. So perhaps we will come back and revisit this in the new year so that we can keep talking about it. But before we get off of it, Jeff, real quick, what do you think in 2019 the industry needs to do to make itself more welcoming for all gamers?
Everything that they said is really, it'd be easy. I could sit back now and just go everything they said. The one thing that I want to call out specifically is we've got a problem. Role-playing games, the industry has a real missing stair problem. There are bad actors, and there are people, people, marginalized groups take a lot of crap from bad actors, and a lot of those bad actors continue to show up at cons and continue to be special guests. And I think that the industry as a whole, particularly non-marginalized voices, need to do a lot more to speak out against that and use the places of privilege that we have as to speak out against that, and basically call out the fact that these things are happening. And when people come out and say, hey, this happened to me, believe those people, listen to those people, and understand that for every person that speaks out, there's 10 more that aren't speaking out, and think about what that means, and use and push back against that. I think that we can be doing a lot better in that regard. And I think that's just something that I think we need to be doing more of in 2019.
Yeah. So I think in the spirit of looking forward to 2019, then I want to talk to you about what your personal goals and resolutions you're looking forward to in 2019 are. So what are some things you want to achieve? What are some things that you are resolved to do, be it either on a personal scale or on a professional scale? And why don't we start with you, Darcy?
I want to play a game in space, and I want there to be romance and tender little moments in it. I've been watching some Star Trek lately, and there's a scene where they have the plot, and then they go into the holodeck and they're playing pool and having this emotional little moment, and I want that. I'm super hungry to get to play or run a game set in space, maybe Star Wars, maybe Star Trek, maybe something Numenera in space. But I want to see I want to feel those tender moments that I've gotten to feel a lot in these LARPs. And I really think they can be brought into role-playing games, and I just haven't gotten to experience them yet. And so I want to feel that. So that's sort of a personal, just big desire of mine, playing wise. And then I think professionally, this has been my first full year, working in the industry. And so I think I've learned a lot during it. And I think in the next year, I want to be a little more deliberate about, kind of self-care and where I put my energies and where I'm spending my time. I think I have had moments where I was just I had months where I was a whole hot mess, and then, I'll swing back and forth. And I think I'm looking for a little more steadiness, a little more clarity for where I'm spending my effort, and making sure that sort of aligns with what I think is valuable to spend my effort on. So
that's good.
Just be better,
it's
Darcy.
Healthy.
It's the goal. God.
Well, if only we knew a cool space game coming out in 2019 that had the potential for tender moments.
I want to fall in love with the ship. I cannot wait to get to play more Burn Break.
Yes, excellent. Jeff, how about you? Personal goals, resolutions that you have for 2019?
I'm not gonna hit you with the 4,000 numbers. I laid out in my journal all of my specific number related goals, and I will spare you the nitty gritty accounting things. But the big picture thing is I want to keep making stuff that is interesting to me, and find new opportunities where I can. But the two big things that kind of stand out to me are, I want to play, Tanya mentioned this earlier, I want to play more games not for the public. We all do so much public facing stuff that the few times that I played a game not with a camera in my face or a microphone were really refreshing and satisfying, and I want more of that. Which is not to say that I don't love doing games with a camera in my face. I am a ham, but I like the opportunity to ham it up for a smaller, more intimate group. The other thing is, we all kind of touched on it when we were talking about the cons that we liked, which was, I think all four of us in saying cons we liked said oh, this is great because I got to see all of these people. Something that I really want to do in 2019 is find dedicated time to connect with people and have those moments outside of conventions, whether it's just in a Discord call or a Skype chat or something, is just find that time. Because I think part of what we all kind of, part of what we're all getting out of conventions is a chance to sit down with this person that we only really find dedicated talking time to, either on social media when everyone is watching, or at a convention when we have 7 different things that we're about to run off to. I want to try to, find dedicated time to just sit down and be hey, you're great. I like you. We're not recording this. We're not making a thing. We're just sitting and chatting. And it doesn't have to be about games, but it can be. It's just about whatever kind of stuff is on our mind, because I don't feel at least personally, I don't feel I make enough time for that with my internet games friends. And I want more of that in the coming year. And I don't want it to be tied to, if my best friends in the world are getting married, I also have to, in the back of my mind, think, oh, but I'm not going to see these people that I only see once every 8 months. So finding more time for that outside of conventions is a thing that I really want to push for in 2019.
I love it. That's such a good goal. And Tanya, how about you? Do you have any 2019 goals or achievements you're looking forward to?
I want to get better with writing in general and writing for RPGs. I really struggled with some assignments, and I've got some things due before the end of the year. But I want to write my own game. I want to write a game that's not someone else's property. I want to get more people into the hobby. And by doing that, I want them to see that it's not just for white dudes. It's not, there's an entryway that does not require hundreds of dollars, or knowing people, or, being able to travel and go to conventions, because the other barriers to conventions, a lot of people don't get to go to those. And even though I get to go to cons, I'm working and I don't play with strangers at conventions. And I want there to be more color. I'm going to be real blatant. I want there to be more color in the industry. I want there to be more women, trans folks that are highlighted. I want it to be more than the assumption that it's just for cis straight white dudes. And I'd like to go to a convention and not play the game of, how many fingers will I get to before I lose count of how many people of color there actually are that aren't the same people of color I keep seeing. And I'd like to be on panels and do work that is not just about diversity. Because there's so much more I can talk about. There's so much more that I want to contribute that is not just, oh, the industry sucks for being brown or being a woman, being queer, all the above, which I am. Because it gets old and I'm losing my patience for the, oh my God, I can't find people of color anywhere questions, or the, I run a convention and I can't find anyone. I can't get people of color and queer people to come to my con, maybe because they don't feel safe. So I want to do more in that sense. And I would like my nonprofit to become self-sustaining so I can hand a lot of that off and be home more. Because I traveled a lot this year. So, and, I would love it if people could realize that the work is not merely a labor of love, but it takes money to do.
Definitely. Especially when you're traveling all the time, because it's not cheap to travel. Well, it would be awesome. And I hope that on that note, you all come back at some point in 2019 so we can talk about more cool stuff in the world of role-playing games and give advice to our listeners and just hang out and have a good time. In the meantime, where can people find you, Darcy, if they want to know more about you and what you do?
Yeah, people can find me on various social media platforms. I'm always Darcy L. Ross, DarcyLRoss. And you can see me tweeting and boosting lots of really, really cool community projects going on all of Monty Cook Games sort of social media places. So MontyCookGames.com has lots of web articles that we write and we talk about. And we'll be talking a lot about your best game ever coming up next year, which I'm really excited for, which Tanya's writing for and is going to give us like so much good advice, and I cannot wait for it. So yeah, you can find us on, Twitter and, G+ before it dies, all of that. And I tweet a lot about science and RPGs. So fair warning if you follow me.
Yeah, and cats. Lots of cat pictures.
There are a lot of cats. There are a lot of cat, so that's not my fault.
It's always good. It's always good cat content. Some of the best on the internet. So yes, absolutely. Where can people find you, Tanya?
People can usually find me everywhere online under Cypher of Tyr. That's CYPHEROFTYR. On Sundays, starting again on January 20th, 2019, you can find us over at twitch.tv/DND for Rivals Waterdeep, starting season 3. And for the next few weekends, you can also find me on Roll20, GMing Modiphius's Star Trek Adventures. I plan to put my players through some hassle before we end this adventure. Yeah, and then, I stream on Twitch. My Twitter, Twitch, all of that is all username Cypher of Tyr. Just be aware that due to some unfun circumstances, I may not be as welcoming as some people might like, and way more cautious than I usually am. So.
Sure, and I hope that that unfun circumstance gets sorted out soon. But thank you for coming on. First roundtable with Tanya, hopefully not the last. And Jeff, where can people find you?
You can find me mainly on Twitter at Party of One Pod. You can also find links to all of the podcasts that I make, the games that I produce, all of that kind of fun stuff at jeffstormer.com. But mainly Twitter, because I'm mainly Twitter trash. That seems to be the core of my being. Yeah, Party of One Pod on Twitter. You can find links to all of the podcasts that I make, games I produce, all of that kind of stuff.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
Well, thank you, James.
That was awesome. I'm looking forward to our D&D chat as well. Thank you so much to Tanya, Darcy, and Jeff for coming on and talking about all of the awesome with me. Tabletop Babble is going into its 3rd year, and we need your help finding new listeners. The best way you can do that is to log on to iTunes and leave us a review. It's free to create an account, and it only takes about 30 seconds. It will really help us, and if you create an account, you can rate all of the other podcasts you love. Plus, if you leave us a 5-star review, I'll read your review out loud and credit the person who left it, like Lawyer Jeff, who left a review entitled Phenomenal Podcast. Tabletop Babble is thoroughly enjoyable and informative. Top marks on sound quality and consistency. I've considered Tabletop Babble a 5-star podcast for some time. After hearing the Chris Spivey episode, I jumped up to cast Raise Dead on my iTunes account so I could write a 5-star review. Thanks for introducing me to thoughtful and intelligent creators like Spivey, and thanks for the consistent quality content. Thank you so much, Lawyer Jeff. I really appreciate it. And you are awesome for listening for this long. And yeah, that Chris Spivey episode is awesome. People should definitely go check it out. It's one of our recent episodes, and that guy gives a great podcast. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso, and you can find me online at worldbuilderblog.com, where I write about game design. Also, if you head on over to don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com, you can find tons of other awesome, great shows like The Demon Plague, which is a 5th edition actual play podcast that I am DMing, and it's got great, great players. TK Johnson, Lauren Urban, Robert Aducci, and of course, the one and only Rudy Basso, my co-owner of Don't Split the Podcast Network. He rocks. Tabletop Babble is a show on Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by BattleBard. So don't forget that RPGs are like sex. You can often watch movies about that. I don't know. Embarrassing.
At the center of the great forest, on an island in the sky, the crow, deer, and wolf clans have been training 3 fearsome warriors from infancy for one purpose: to protect and serve the goddess of Estra.
So how exactly are we going to do that? Protecting the goddess, I mean.
Fran lies down.
Leica can't answer because she's too busy sniffing both your butts.
Okay, back off, Wolf Clan.
This disturbs me, but not to worry, I will instantly repress it.
These are the guardians of the goddess. Leica, the tiefling paladin who hails from the Wolf Clan.
Nobody's touching one beautiful hair on the goddess's head as long as I'm around.
Corbin, a human druid from the Crow Clan.
Human! I'm a crow!
And Fran, a water genasi wizard of the Deer Clan.
So, is there a way to quit this job or what?
This unlikely trio will venture forth into an unfamiliar world without knowing who can be trusted against the powerful dark force stalking the steps of their goddess and threatening the future of their world. Tune in every second Monday to Dames and Dragons, a 5th edition D&D actual play podcast. See ya then!